last time I lectured on depression, I didn't bring a handout, and I've been roundly criticized for that, so tonight I brought one. As Cheryl mentioned, depression is much more common in our population now than it was even 10, 15 years ago. And I talk about that in the first paragraph. A recent Gallup poll came up with the number 29% of the U.S. population report having depression or having had depression in the past. That's almost a third of our country has had or currently has depression. The prevalence, that is how many people currently have it, is 18.5%. So almost 20% of the population, or a fifth, currently has depression. So if you struggle with depression, you're not alone. And that's somewhat comforting. Sometimes when we're depressed, we feel like we're all alone and nobody understands. But you're not alone if you're depressed today. In 1991, it was only 3% of the population. By 2001, it was 7%, and today it's 18%. So that's really growing rapidly. The NIH estimates that the yearly economic cost or burden of depression has increased from $236 billion to $326 billion in the last 10 years or so. That's a lot of money. We could all benefit from some of that, right? 326 billion. Depression is the leading cause of disability in ages 15 to 44. So this is a major problem, and it's the primary reason why someone dies of suicide every 12 minutes in the U.S. Depression is no fun, as those of us who have lived with it, had it, struggled with it, know very well. There was an article by Brandon Hidaka in the 2013 Journal of Affective Diseases, and he said this: modern populations are increasingly overfed, malnourished, sedentary, sunlight deficient, and socially isolated. And these changes contribute to poor physical health and affect the incidence and treatment of depression. And he's right. There's good scientific evidence to show that those things are really what's driving our epidemic of depression in our country today. And I want to look at each one of those in a little detail, and then we'll talk about things as we go that we can do to avoid that. You can almost say, as you look around the world, that if you aren't depressed, a little bit depressed, there's something wrong with you. We have a sense that things aren't right, don't we? You look at Ukraine, you look at Israel, it just doesn't seem right. And so it's not really abnormal to be a little bit sad about the condition of our world. So just don't despair if you have a tendency to be depressed. That may not be so abnormal. We have a sense that things aren't right. And with the climate, I didn't even mention that. Things are a little different than what we'd like. But there are things we can do. So we'll take the first one there together, exercise. Multiple studies dating all the way back to 1984 and before, but that's when it really started being talked about, show benefits of exercise on depression. Duke University did a study that showed that regular vigorous exercise was as effective as antidepressants. The problem is when you're depressed, you can't get out of your own way much, go out and exercise. But if you have a partner that will exercise with you and say, come on, let's do this together, that can be really, really helpful. As I detail down there's even exercising as little as 15 minutes a day has been shown to be beneficial for depression. But increasing that all the way up to 90 minutes a day is really helpful. You get more benefit if you exercise longer. But if you're way out of shape or you just don't have the power, the mental power to do it, 15 minutes, and you know, it doesn't have to be vigorous. Walking alone, just walking is enough to make an improvement in depression. And one of the reasons for that is depression is partially an inflammatory problem. We've talked about inflammation a lot in these courses, and we know that people with depression suffer more inflammation of the brain and the body. Depression worsens more than just brain inflammation. You can get joint pain that worsens with depression. You can get stomach ulcers that worsen with depression. Why? Well, inflammation underlies them all. And so anything that we can do to reduce inflammation will help us fight depression. And exercise does that very nicely. And there's a whole list of inflammatory markers there that go up with depression and go down with exercise. And so exercise is an ideal anti-inflammatory process unless you overdo it. I would not run marathons for depression. Why? Because marathons, you push yourself so far that it's commonly reported after a marathon that people will catch a cold or get sick or have problems because they push too far. And so don't overdo a good thing. 90 minutes a day is plenty for depression. You don't need to run 26 miles, which gives me great comfort. I'm glad for that. So they did a fascinating study. It was published in the Journal of Mental Health there. I have it listed. They gave ladies, ladies had cell phones, men do too, but they just looked at women. And, you can track people on their cell phones, right? Wherever they go, you can know. You can do this to your kids or whatever. Well, they tracked these ladies. And you know what they found? The more often they moved, the less depression they had. And the less often they moved, the more depression they had. So just moving around the house and getting out and going to the store and any of that motion, just you could say moving your cell phone to one place to another improves depression, because really that's what they were measuring. So if you're feeling a little depressed, just keep moving that cell phone and it'll help out. Exercise is really important, and to think that it's as effective as an antidepressant medication, that's hopeful. Even if you feel like you just can't do any, try to have someone help you move. Moving helps us. Sunlight. Here's another one that's really interesting. Now, it was hard to get sunlight today. But sunlight in Journal of Affective Disease 2021, they showed that for every additional hour spent outdoors during the day, it was associated with lower lifetime odds of major depression. I like that. So get out in the sunlight. Now, you don't have to get out there without clothes. It's, some people think, well, I got to be in a swimsuit to get benefit from the sun. No, you don't. It's the light that makes the difference. And as long as you're not wearing dark sunglasses or, avoiding the light, it's the light. And you don't look at the sun, but just the light itself And if you are in northern New England and it's kind of gray outside, you can use a light box. And a light box can be very, very helpful. You want to have about 10,000 lux. But if you have you can buy those lights and turn them on and be in front of the light box for 30 minutes a day. It makes a big difference in depression. That's true with seasonal affective disorder, but it's true with depression generally. We were made to be outside. I mean, if you read the good book, it says God put Adam and Eve in the garden. Well, it's kind of hard to be in the garden this time of year, but there's a reason for us to be out there. We respond to light. And getting that light, if you're going to get it from a light box, get it early in the morning when you first wake up. Turn on that light and get in front of it. Or, better yet, get outside. Even if it's a gray day, there's a lot of light outside and it benefits depression. Very important. Most studies that have looked at light show that you get an improvement within 2 weeks, which is nice. I don't like to, I mean, most antidepressants won't work for 2 to 4 weeks anyway, so get your light while you're swallowing your pills, maybe, I don't know. Another major cause, particularly in adolescents, but more and more in us more mature segment of the population, is exposure to electronic devices. And there are many, many studies that look at this. Things like gaming. If you really want your kids to get depressed, give them an electronic device and introduce them to gaming. That's about the best way to cause depression. But even, texting your friends is associated with depression. I was preparing for this lecture, and someone texted me, and I started to respond. I thought, no, I don't want to get depressed. I'm going to lay that thing down. We do way better face to face, don't we? I've seen kids sit in the same room, and instead of talking to each other, they're texting each other. Come on. I've yet to see a cell phone that would give you a nice warm pat, or better yet, a hug. And we need that stuff. Touch is really important, and not touch like this. It's really fascinating. Even spending time on a computer at work. Now, I spend an inordinate amount of time on the computer at work. I've been trying to get a scribe so I wouldn't have to touch that thing. But they did a study, it was published in 2016. Workers who spend more than 75% of their time on computers have much higher rates of depression than those that spend less than 50%. And one of the reasons why depression has gone up since COVID is because there was a lot of remote workers working on computer. And that alone will cause depression. We weren't meant to interact primarily with an electronic device. We were meant to interact with real people. Question.
Is the type of light that these devices generate a problem?
It is a problem, primarily because it's blue light, and blue light impairs melatonin production. Whatever you do, don't look at the computer or your cell phone in the evening. That's the other thing. If you want to get depressed or get someone depressed, have them play with their cell phone at night. That really causes a problem with depression because it interferes with sleep. Turn off those cell phones, turn off those computers and TVs, which are blue light, in the evening, because that causes insomnia in a major way, and we really need to interact with real live people with skin, not these things. So electronic devices are driving much of the depression epidemic, particularly in the young. And the more you can get them off of that, the better.
What's the difference between TV and any electronic device? Is there frequency difference? Is there a light difference?
Yeah, there is some light difference. TV we're not quite as interactive with as we are with a cell phone or a computer. And so they tend to run in the background and we don't pay as much attention. But the light, it's primarily blue light. If you're going to use an electronic device, get special glasses that filter out the blue light. That helps some. But generally speaking, when the sun goes down, turn off the device. Yeah, that's tough.
Relax.
I know, it's a time to relax and talk with each other and visit with people. And, you know, where did that go? You know, we had these people visit my wife recently. She was in school, in high school and college with this lady. You know, 8 years together, they were best friends. And I thought, this is going to be really neat to see them interact. And what did this lady do the whole time? I thought, didn't you come to visit my wife? I mean, really? No. I thought, great. And she'd ask her a question and she'd say, well, let me look that up on the internet. Instead of just saying, well, you know, well, as I remember, or something like that. And as I watched that, I thought, I'm putting that cell phone away. I don't want to get like that.
But you know, the internet does help in terms of liars and people who just, you know, spout information. So,
well, it can help with that. It can also cause problems. Now, there is one interesting thing, and this comes up with social isolation. The one group of people that were helped by electronic devices were the elderly who were socially isolated, couldn't get out, and they could then communicate some with their friends and family. That group of people who were already socially isolated and couldn't fix it because of mobility issues, actually it lessened depression, which is exactly what you'd expect. Whenever an electronic device distances you from a real live breathing, heart-beating person, it's going to increase your risk of depression. When it enables you to communicate better and you don't have the option of being in their presence, it'll lessen depression. FaceTime is a great example of that. Or, you know, getting online and seeing people. That's not as good as being there in person. But if you can't be there in person, interacting with a real live person, even on an electronic device, is somewhat helpful if you're otherwise socially isolated.
how about pets?
Pets, I didn't cover that, but I can tell you that pets are really good for depression and preventing dementia. And I love this study. It's been 20 years ago now. They did a study where they took people with pets and they divide them into those who walked their pets, particularly dogs, and those that didn't. Those that walked their dogs lived 7 years longer on average than those that didn't. So, you know, if you don't have a dog, just get a leash and walk your leash, you know. But, yeah. Yeah. Oh, my cat's my good friend, so, yeah. And you know, it's interesting, my cat, every time I drive home, tonight, same thing. She comes out to my car to meet me. Yeah. She's an outside cat, but she comes to meet me. All right. So social isolation is associated with increased depression, and that's true across all age groups. And don't let your electronic devices separate you from people. If you're with someone, set them down. Put them in your pocket or throw them across the room, something. Don't use them. All right, so usually we talk about diet, and that's all we talk about, but so I'm getting to it. Here it is. Diets rich in antioxidants and rich in fiber lower depression because both lower inflammation. That's why. This recipe that she cooked tonight has a lot of fiber in it. That's the beans. That'll be good for your depression. And the color, you want those carrots and you want the green peppers and the red peppers and any other color you can get in there, because that'll lower inflammation and lower risk of depression. 5 grams of dietary fiber intake gives you about a day gives you about a 5% reduction in risk of depression. That's a pretty good return. So ramp it up to 30 grams a day and you'll have a 30% reduction. Why? You're reducing inflammation. You know what else you're doing? You're feeding bacteria that make serotonin. You've heard of serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Those are the antidepressants we all use. Where does most of the serotonin in your body come from? From the bacteria in your gut. So if you can get on a high fiber diet, those bacteria love that fiber, and those fiber eating bacteria make all sorts of beneficial things for you, including serotonin, which helps lower your risk of depression. So who knew that those bacteria were helping you? You thought they were just going out, but they sit there and make things for you too. So feed them. They like fiber. Interestingly, if you eat a diet that's high in animal products, the bacteria that like animal products create inflammation. And if you don't want to take antidepressants, you can always opt for stool enemas or stool transplant, because stool transplants from a healthy, happy person to a depressed person do improve depression. And so if you don't want fiber, there are other options. But I'm not sure. You choose your donor carefully, right? If you change your diet, your bacteria change. And as they change, so do the products they make. And so inflammation goes down, serotonin levels go up, and it will help depression. 5 grams, 5% reduction. I like that. For every 100-gram increase in daily fruit or vegetable intake, you get a 3% risk reduction for depression. So, you know, if you eat a half an apple, that's about 100 grams. So if you eat a whole apple, that's 200. So now we're at a 6% reduction. And if you're on a strict plant-based diet, you get about 9 to 10 servings, or which is 100 grams of vegetables and fruits. So now we're at a 30% risk reduction. So if you ramp up the fiber and ramp up the fruits and vegetables, you can get maybe a 60% risk reduction. That's pretty good. That's better than most medications. Add that to some exercise and you're really making progress. Well, that's a physical diet. What about a mental diet? This is probably the most important one with depression. Did you know that the thoughts you think change the very structure of the brain you think them with? Now, I caught Gus on that. He said, what? The thoughts you think change the very structure of the brain that you think them with. Now, we know this because we've done studies on string players. You know, these start out really little doing this kind of thing. Well, I've got to get it up here or somewhere. The cortex that controls their left hand is much more highly developed than the average person, because they're doing that. Well, that's interesting. You mean doing this changes my brain? Yeah, it does. In fact, every time you think a thought, it changes connections up there. Well, you better be pretty careful what you think, right? And some people say, well, that thought just came into my head. Okay, you know, you can't stop the birds from flying over your head, but you can stop them from making a nest in your hair, right? And a thought may come in and you can say, nope, I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm going to think. You do choose what you think about. And don't try to escape it. But those thoughts make a difference. And they make a difference with depression. It's really interesting. Have you heard recently a friend say, I've stopped watching the news, it's too depressing? Yeah, me, she says, me. Because you know that intuitively, that awful stuff, if you get into it, you get depressed. And so, all right, then let's choose some good things to think. It makes a difference. It really does make a difference. The thoughts you think and the words you say. Have you ever noticed that if you say to someone, how are you today? Oh, I'm feeling kind of bad. You start feeling bad. But if you're not feeling very good and you think, well, I don't want to get this person feeling bad. I'm doing pretty good. Well, pretty soon you start feeling better because the words you say do influence how you think. That's an interesting thought. Be careful what you say because that affects not only the person you're talking to, it affects you too. And that plays right in with depression, and you don't want to do that. So in summary, moderate exercise on most days of the week, 30 to 90 minutes would be ideal, preferably with a friend. Why? Because if you're depressed, you need someone to call you up and say, look, I know you don't feel like it, but I really want to go and exercise with you. Have you noticed that if you walk with someone who's a good friend, you tend to walk more often? Yeah. We're social animals, social beings, and it's really important to get yourself out of doors or exercise somewhere together whenever possible. If you can't find anyone, call me up. I can find somebody to exercise with you. My wife loves to exercise. She likes to walk with people, and yeah, I could sign her up for a few of you anyway. But not when I'm home. Only when I'm at work. When I'm home, then I'm going to walk with her. All right. Try to get an hour of outdoor light a day. At least an hour of outdoor light. When the sun's shining, that's great, but even on a cloudy day, outdoor light is really helpful. In the morning is the best, and if you can't get that, at least think about getting yourself a light, one of those 10,000 lux lights, and they're available. You can get them for $30, or if you feeling like you want a really good one, you can spend more, and it's probably not better, but if you spend more, sometimes you think it'll work better. So do what you need to. Use electronic devices less than 2 hours a day. People that use them more than 2 hours a day, I'm not talking at work, but around the house and whatnot, there's definite increase in risk of depression. Don't use them in the evening. Ideally use them to communicate with others only when you cannot personally meet them. Emails, in the office, I don't know what it is. Everything's on computer now. And my medical assistant is sitting right there. Will she say something to me? No, she has to send it to me in come on, talk to me. It's so much. How much do you miss when you don't talk to someone? You don't get the intonation or the tone of voice. You don't get the facial expression. You don't get any of that. All you get is da-da-da-da-da. And then you think, well, I got to write them back and ask them what they meant. And then they have to write you back and ask them, well, what you meant. Any time that you can talk to a real living, breathing person, it's going to help. So do that whenever possible. Seek out opportunities to have meaningful in-person social interactions like we did tonight. This is meaningful, and it's social interaction, and it helps with preventing depression. Hopefully it did anyway. Eat a diet rich in colorful fruits and vegetables and increase your fiber intake. If you're really struggling with depression, try to get it up to 30 or more grams a day. And don't do it all at once though, because if you've been on a low fiber diet and you go to a high fiber diet right away, you're going to have a lot of uncomfortable gas. And you got to switch over those bacteria. So gradually increase it. And you'll do a lot better. And then lastly, forgive quickly. Have you ever met someone that something bad had happened to them and they carried it with them wherever they went? You know, maybe their mama had been, or their dad, or someone had abused them or something, and they have it in a handbag with them. And you sit down and you know that the conversation's going to go there within 10 minutes of sitting down with them. And what they really need to do is say, you know, probably that person treated me badly because they were treated badly once. And if you can develop compassion and understanding, I'm not saying excuse what they did. Forgiveness doesn't do that, but you develop a little compassion for them. Embrace that. And one other thing, you know, sometimes when you're depressed, I deal with depressed people frequently, and their depression is such a heavy thing that they can't get anything done, and they can't get out of their own way, and they can't see past today. And you know, one of the best things to bring meaning back into your life is to try to help somebody else. And whether you smile and say, good to see you, even though you don't feel like smiling, that helps lift your spirits. If there's one thing that I could get people to do to bring meaning into their life, it would be to help somebody else. No matter how bad you're feeling, because really what we want is to feel like we have a meaningful, purposeful life. And what's really our purpose in life? Is to help each other, isn't it? I mean, let's just stop and think about it. What if Putin, I hate to pick on him, but, well, no, I don't. I'd like to pick on him. What if he had, before this whole mess in Ukraine started, what if he had said, I think I'm going to call up Zelensky and ask him if I can do something to help him. You know, I have a lot of Russians that live over there, and maybe I could call up Zelensky and say, a lot of my countrymen live in your country. Is there anything I could do to make their lot better? And while I'm at it, I'd really like to improve the life of Ukrainians. You know, we've got a lot of fertilizer in Russia, and you've got a lot of good land. Maybe if we work together, we could ease world hunger. What do you think would have happened? Well, I'll tell you one thing, we would have saved a lot of money, because I added it up, and Europe and United States have sent them over $400 billion to fight that war. Do you think we could have done something more constructive with it? If our first impulse was, how can I help? How would that change our world? And you know, do you think Putin's gotten a lot more friends by what he's done? You know, he'd probably be the man of the year if he had gone to Zelensky and said, how can I help? We could feed Africa if we worked together instead of shooting each other's grain ships, right? But bring that back to a personal level. If you're feeling down and really bad, think of try to think of a way that you can help somebody else. I remember a patient, I've told this story before. I was on call in the emergency room when Parkview Hospital was still operational, and a patient came in who was dying of a inherited liver disease. She had alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, and as a result had gotten end-stage liver disease and actually came in to die. And when the ER doc called me, I thought, great, a patient I don't even know, and she's coming to the hospital to die. This is going to be one downer. And so I walked into the ER, and here's this lady, and she had typical liver disease, end stage. She was swollen everywhere. I mean, her legs were weeping, but you know, she was cheerful. I thought, this is strange. She's dying and cheerful. And she was making jokes while she was trying to catch her breath. And I admitted her to the hospital. I can even point out where the room used to be. I remember it so clearly. It was the last room on the right at the end of med-surg. And, you know, the nurses, after a day or so, were fighting to take care of her. No, it's my turn to take care of her. No, I want to. Because she was a scream. She was so full of it as she was dying. And I'll never forget the day she died. That room there was at least 30, if not 40 people in her room. They all wanted to be with her. Why? Because although she could have been really depressed with the mess she was in, she was just so much other-focused, trying to bring happiness and joy to other people. You know, we're all going to die, right? That's depressing. But we can have our life taken from us, or we can spend the last years giving our life away, right? And she was just giving up life, just handing it out, and it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. A cheerful person. I'll never forget on Halloween, I walked in there and she had this big old grotesque mask on. She said, "Doctor, do you see this thing here? Do you think it could be my problem?" I said, "No, I think it's the answer." You know, if you read Scripture, it says, "So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets." And isn't that it? We should treat each other like we'd like to be treated, and not like we've been treated necessarily if it's been bad, because that sums up all the good, right? In Ephesians it says, "Be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another." If you want to lift your depression, look for a way to be kind to somebody else. It really is helpful. Even if you're in a really dark place, if you can just do something simple to help someone else, it'll make a difference. So be kind. If you can, I worked with a lady recently who had this little thing on her desk, and it said, "If you can be anything, be kind." Have you seen that? If you can be anything, be kind. It would be heaven if we lived in a world where everyone was kind, right? And guess what? And everyone who by the grace of God is kind will be in heaven one day. The best treatment for depression is to make someone else's life a little better. And try that. It makes a difference. Any questions? Question?
Haven't there been studies done that prove that highly processed foods and fried foods just exacerbate anxiety and depression?
Oh, sure. There are lots of those, and that's why I said eat whole plant foods, because those highly processed foods increase inflammation. I think I mentioned this last time I lectured. Everything we eat, we burn, right? Well, burning is inflammation. And so how do we prevent our food from hurting us? We eat food that's rich in anti-inflammatory compounds, which are called antioxidants, and that's colorful fruits and vegetables. Anytime you're having sugar, there are no antioxidants in sugar, and so you're going to get inflammation. The same is true with most oils. The same is true with animal products. You know, as soon as an animal dies, it stops making antioxidants. They quickly go away. And so when you eat that animal product, you don't get any antioxidants, you get inflammation. Absolutely. And they're closely associated with increased rates of depression. Question?
You mentioned the beans feeding the bacteria. Do you have any recommendations like kombucha or yogurt?
Great question. And that is, all right, can we eat food that already has bacteria in it? So have you made, have you ever made sauerkraut?
No. I buy it.
All right, how do you make sauerkraut?
Cabbage, salt, and caraway seeds. And you grate the cabbage.
Well, where did the bacteria come from?
It ferments.
Where did the bacteria come from?
Air?
It was already on that plant. You know, every plant has bacteria on it. And the brassicas, that's cabbage and cauliflower, they have lactobacillus that grow with them symbiotically. And all we do is add a little salt to prevent them from rotting, and those bacteria grow. But you could eat cabbage plain and you get it too. And all of these vegetables have wonderful things on them called bacteria. And the soil does too. And so don't wash your vegetables within an inch of their life if you're growing them yourself. Now, you know, so yes, any fermented food that has good bacteria in it is good for you. Be careful if it's fermented by rotting, that's not good. But yogurt, that's lactobacillus, kombucha, whatever you want. That's fine, but you get it on regular vegetables when you eat them raw as well. Yeah, probiotics are really important, but not as important as prebiotics, which is fiber. Yeah, question?
Is there any advice that's different than what's on this handout for anxiety reduction, or is it all the same advice?
If I was going to, it's the same, except for anxiety, I would put exercise even higher. I have a patient, I saw her today. She's been my patient for 32 years. And she came in, I don't know, probably 25 years ago, and she's a school teacher, and she was suffering from anxiety. And, you know, I gave her what most people usually give, and that's anti-anxiety medicine, Xanax in this case. And then she said, well, that's really nice, and started using more and more. And I said, we can't do that. You got to get over this anxiety. You need to start exercise. She took up kickboxing. Now, you imagine a grade school teacher that can kickbox. And then she became an instructor, and then she got into CrossFit, and all her symptoms went away. And she was doing great until COVID hit. And she didn't go to the exercise, and then I started seeing that she was asking for more of that Xanax, and I called her up and I said, what's happening? Oh, I need to get exercising again. Exercise is really good for anxiety. It's super. Why? Well, if someone walked in here and shot me and said, all right, you're next, but before I kill you, I want to check your pulse and measure your blood pressure. What would happen? Well, it would be really high. Why? Because epinephrine from your adrenal glands would have gone into your bloodstream, and you would all be feeling anxious, right? Even though he hadn't shot you yet. Well, anxiety is primarily not from someone shooting you, although that can cause anxiety, but it's from things that happen to us where we can't react physically. Exercise helps us burn off those adrenal hormones so that our blood pressure comes down and our pulse comes down, and then we're not anxious anymore. It's really, really good for anxiety. It cures it. It really does. You may need more than 30 minutes a day. You may, if you're living in a tough situation, you may need a lot of exercise, but it's worth it. Question?
What kind of timeline would it take to do the exercise to help with the anxiety?
Yeah, you'll notice a benefit within a week, but you continue as your fitness increases and the time increases, you'll notice improvements up to 3 months. Yeah, or more. But if you're exercising like this lady did, I mean, she got really, really fit. I mean, and her anxiety was gone. But then she slipped back. But I lowered the boom on her today. She said, I know, I know, I know. Yeah. All right, well, thank you very much.